Right, good morning everyone. For those that have just joined and for the many new friends we have made on this webinar this morning, I'm Mike Morgan, the CEO of the Southern Africa Canada Chamber of Commerce, and it is our pleasure and privilege to be able to host our partner Eduvos on what promised to be a most insightful webinar. So welcome to you all. Before we do anything else, I'd just like to confirm that proceedings are being recorded. Proceedings are being recorded, and there will also be a YouTube recording made available sometime over the weekend. So I'm obliged to let you know that the proceedings are being recorded and it will be made available on our website, and we'll let you know about that. Just some house rules before we get in. We are expecting to have in excess of 70 people with us today. So in the interest of maintaining bandwidth and the integrity of our platform, I request that the participants switch their cameras off and keep their mics muted until you're called upon to, I will recognize you during question time, at which stage you can activate your mics and your cameras. So really, it's wonderful to have you. It's perhaps fitting that we should end 2021 in terms of our webinars on such a high note. So to all my friends at Eduvos, thank you very much for making this possible. And without any further ado, I would like to introduce Mrs. Siggy Brownlee, the Managing Director, CEO at Eduvos. Over to you, Siggy. Siggy, I think you're on mute. Siggy, you're muted. Siggy, you're muted. Whoops.
There you go. Is that
there? You go. Okay, this often happens.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
We have you loud
and I'm absolutely delighted to be here at this webinar this afternoon. In fact, Eduvos is absolutely delighted to have joined the Southern Africa Canada Chamber of Commerce, and we're also very delighted to be part of this webinar today with the Centre of Excellence. And it really is about supporting the financial services industry and this forum in the very important role that you all play in encouraging dialogue and awareness amongst leaders within the industry. I've been told that I can tell or talk about Eduvos for a minute or two, and that's a really dangerous thing to let me do, because I'm incredibly proud and excited about the organisation. So just a little bit about Eduvos. We're a leading provider of private higher education in South Africa, and in fact the company was established in 1979 under CTI and the Midrand Graduate Institute brands. And then you will recall it later changed hands and became known as the Pearson Institute of Higher Education. And then in February this year, a consortium comprising Stellenbosch Graduate Institute and Exeo Capital actually purchased our organisation, and we were renamed as Eduvos. We've got 12 campuses nationally around South Africa, and we offer over 32 fully accredited and internationally recognised qualifications, and that includes degrees and higher certificate programs across commerce, arts, humanities, IT, law, and even in applied sciences. For the forum today, our finance qualifications are endorsed by ACCA, and you're probably aware that that's the international accounting body, and also by CIMA, and we're delighted to announce too that we are in the final stages of obtaining accreditation by SAICA for our qualifications and our institute. I think what's really important about Eduvos is that we're absolutely driven by our passion, and we're driven by our purpose of shaping potential student by student towards Africa's prosperity. We offer full-time, we offer part-time and distance learning programs, and I'm pleased to announce that we are going to be opening up a business school in January this year called Eduvos at Work, and we are there going to be able to assist with all corporate training needs and with executive education. Our passion at Eduvos is really about making a difference in the lives of others through private and affordable education in South Africa. And really, we'd absolutely love to be of assistance to you, to your employees, and to your organisation. So our very best wishes accompany you all. I want to thank you again for this wonderful opportunity of being part of this webinar. Thank you for having us, and I hope you all enjoy it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, CE, and thank you for sharing those insights into Eduvos. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator. I had to give it some thought last night and again early this morning in thinking, what does one say to someone who has really made his mark in the financial services industry in South Africa and, dare I say, on the African continent? If anybody is going to hold our esteemed panelists' feet to the fire this morning, it's going to be you, Mark. I'm sure you are going to tease out the collective wisdom, experience across a broad range of experience across the financial services sector that we are privileged to host this morning. Mark is the Executive Director of the Centre of Excellence in Financial Services, providing research into the role that financial services can play in achieving national and indeed international objectives. He has many years of experience in policy advocacy for the banking industry and has worked in the treasury of commercial banks. He holds a Bachelor of Economics and a Master of Science in Financial Management from the University of London. Mark, it is indeed a privilege to host you this morning. So without any further ado, the show goes on. Over to you, Mark.
So thanks very much, Mike, for that glowing introduction. Today's webinar is focused on digital identity. And so for those of you that are coming in from outside of South Africa, it's either a good morning or good afternoon or good evening to you. And as you've been noted, the webinar is being recorded and will be made available to the public. So please manage your comment in the chat. And if you do have Q&A questions, please put them in the chat so we can have a look at them before we introduce them to the panelists. As a moderator, I'm going to try and give you my objective of the day so that you can at least come away with an understanding of what it is that we're trying to achieve. So the first thing I'd like you to take away from today's panel session is to establish what a digital identity is or is not. And the second element is to empower you as individuals to begin a conversation in your communities, in other words, either business or your personal communities, your churches, etc., around how digital identity can be used. We want to hear from you on your use cases, and I'm going to put into the chat an email address that you can send your potential use cases to so that we can have a look at them. Our panelists are active in digital identity, and what I've asked them to do is to try and use dinner conversation rather than tech speak to be able to give you the opportunity to understand a little bit better what digital identity is. Introducing the panel in no particular order, we have Ms. Deline Deal, who's the Executive Head of Secure Citizen, a digital identity business that has partnered with the banking industry South African Fraud Prevention Services. Welcome, Deline.
Thank you very much, Mark.
We then have Sean Mouton, who's the Chief Technology Manager and Head of R&D at one of South Africa's largest commercial banks, ABSA, working on digital identity solutions. Welcome, Sean.
You're on mute, Sean.
Good morning, everyone.
It's probably the most said
challenges
sentence.
there. We then have Chantal Moritz, who is a partner in strategy and their consulting network at PwC, working with the banking industry's BankServe Africa to produce a document on South Africa's journey on digital identity. Welcome to you, Chantal.
Good morning, everybody.
And finally, we have Simon Lowe, who's joining us from London, where he's a partner in EMEA Retail and Business Banking Practice and leader of the Customer First platform in Europe for Oliver Wyman, and is working with the International Banking Federation on documenting digital identity. Welcome, Simon.
Good morning, everybody. Very happy to be here.
Unfortunately, Dr. Sisile Matinyane, who is the official from the Department of Home Affairs, was unable to join us today. And although he did let us know in advance, we were unable to get another suitable candidate. So I'm going to be the moderator and also try and help set the stage in this first round. So let's begin. Last year, the World Bank conducted research that suggested nearly 1 billion people around the world have no legal identity, which means they're excluded from the formal economy and cannot open a bank account to deposit money, vote in elections, or access formal credit. Now, if we look at South Africa, we are fortunate in that the government has provided a form of identity since 1950. In 1966, the South African government had captured 10 million sets of fingerprints, making it the second largest collection of fingerprints in the world. More recently, our journey of modernization, the paper-based identity book has moved to a smart card in 2013 that has additional security features. So the Department of Home Affairs produces what we will introduce as golden source documents, birth certificates, ID cards, passports, and in addition, they record civil registrations like marriage, manage international migration, and refugee protection. None of these functions can and should be privatized and will form part of the golden source that digital identity will be built on top of. In December of 2020, the DHA released their draft official identity management policy, which has been finalized at the moment, and we will include addressing non-binary gender, the mandatory recording of death, together with digitalization drives to move from a paper-based record to a digital record, expanding biometrics. For the Department of Home Affairs, constitutional requirement for identity is guaranteed, and they become the central point for the role of government in official identity. What is a game changer for South Africa is that since 2018, another banking industry company, the South African Bank Risk Information Center, could gain direct access to the Department of Home Affairs database to verify customer identities by matching their fingerprints against the government database. SABRIC deals with violent crimes such as cash in transit, heists, etc., amongst other functions. So today we talk to digital identity. Government is the key enabler of digital identity, and therefore I go to Deline and I'm going to ask a question of the panelists. Deline, so if I have a driver's license or an identity card or a passport, if I just take a photograph of it and put it onto my phone, do I have a digital identity?
No, but you're on the right track. So digital identity, so a physical driver's license or the government issued identity is something that'll still live in your wallet and it'll still be valid and you can use it in the traditional way that we currently do today. But there is technology that now exists that allows for us to be able to actually verify the individual against the golden source digitally, and that actually helps us to combat impersonation fraud. So remember, fraudsters are really good at creating fake IDs, and traditionally you would go with a copy of your ID and the ID card or the driver's license to a police station, and you'd get a commissioner of oaths to verify that the person standing in front of you and the picture on the smart ID matches what's on the photocopy. And that's traditionally been trusted. But at no point does that police officer or the commissioner of oaths have the capability to verify that the person standing in front of them actually is who they claim to be. And what digital identity will allow us to do is to actually verify against the golden source in real time. And we are able to do that using face, fingerprint. We've added the ability to use voice, and part of that national identity system that you mentioned from the DHA, they also want to be able to include other biometrics that will be coming down the line. But it does create a safer way of verifying the person in front of you is who they claim to be. So
thank you. So the logical conclusion of that is that if I have a physical wallet, which has got all the plastic in it, and now we're moving to a digital wallet, which is something different. It's not just a copy of my physical plastic.
Yep.
How do I get it onto my phone? Sean?
Almost answered there. Sean.
Go ahead, I'll walk away. So very in line with what Dalian was saying, is it is another app on your mobile device. It works like in the Apple Wallet type scenario. The difference between what you have within your Apple Wallet versus a digital identity, digital wallet is, from an Apple perspective, it's almost a self-attesting. It's a copy of the physical plastic, or a copy of your ID book, or your driver's license, or proof of bank account, where with the identity wallet itself, the starting point is the verification to the Department of Home Affairs. In other words, the app you download, like you normally would do, you would enter data that would go to the Department of Home Affairs, verify, and on top of that is the components of liveliness. So, is the person that is currently performing the action alive? It is not a 3D print of the individual or a wax form of the individual. It performs a liveliness test, and then of course there's the facial matching that takes place. So now your identity wallet has a digitized version of the data that you typically would have on your ID card, and that's the starting point. And from that starting point on, you can then start adding other things, or other credentials as they are referred to, like your driver's license. So you would use your digital identity to hook into the traffic department, get a list of your fines, hook into your bank account, your bank, and get a list of your bank accounts. That is that golden source starting point to make it authentic. So from a let's call it impersonation perspective, the individual can't impersonate your face. He might have access to your data, but he doesn't have access to your face. So part of this process is to make sure that when the onboarding is done into the application itself, that it is authentic, it's the right individual, he's alive, and it is matched to the golden source. So the application in itself is a digitized version of your physical wallet that you would hold in your pocket. You'd have the phone in your pocket as well. And there's a lot of things moving into this area. You have Apple Pay with virtual cards. They also go through the same process of authenticating you, going to your bank to make sure it's you that it's been issued to. So the same process applies when you are dealing with a digital identity wallet.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is that the golden source, which is the Department of Home Affairs, will validate who you are. It goes onto a platform called a cell phone, and on that platform you can then start doing liveliness tests, etc. And you can start adding what you were calling credentials, additional credentials. That's a smart word for something like a university degree. So Sean, I just want to confirm, if I get my mate at the university to receive your phone call to say, does he have a PhD in astrophysics? Is that covered in the way in which it works?
So from an app perspective, there's no person involved. So this is machine to machine. If you can get the machine to lie on the other end, we would like to meet you, because we'd also like to know how to bypass that. But yes, in the context of the digitized domain, this is machine to machine conversations. So it's not you talking to an individual that is typing on a screen to be able to send you the credentials.
Perfect. And so let's move to Chantal now. And Chantal, I mean, this is starting to sound interesting. This is a new way of looking at the way things are happening. I mean, in South Africa, I've now got this digital wallet on my phone. There's a lot of applications. What are we going to have a digital identity in South Africa, and what are we doing?
That's a good question. And I think the question should maybe be, can we afford not to have a digital identity? That is if you look, and I know, Simon, you're going to talk about the global examples, but it's important to realize that what it can do for the country, it's a catalyst for economic growth. And you can talk about all these benefits and as a consumer, all the things that you can think about. But it's important to recognize the how to get there. And in the journey that we've followed to date, and I'm so pleased to see names on the call I recognize, and the team, the panelists with me here today, we've been on a journey together. Yes, we talk about the Banks of Africa report, and we'll share the link in the chat as well. But the essence of this collaboration and this drive by Banks of Africa was almost to recognize all the progress that has been made to date. Digital identity is not something new. It's not a new fad. It's actually been a process that has been followed, and it's a journey. But the value of digital identity is when you join these network of networks. So what does that mean? It means that you take the best of various people and organizations across South Africa, and you form this brains trust. So this brains trust brings this knowledge, brings the expertise, whether it's technical, I just hear an echo on the line there, whether it's technical or whether it's regulatory expertise or whether it's customer experience. And that's what this report did. It said, let's capture the narrative of South Africa. It may not be perfect. Someone might sit and say, well, my voice isn't in there. If it's not in there, by the end of today, we'll tell you how you can join. But the key factor here is if we want to really get the value out of a story like this, it's about the South African journey. Make it fit for purpose. Look at the global examples, add it to what we need as South Africans, and create this narrative. So the report outlines some global expertise, some global knowledge, but then brings it back home and says, what does the Department of Home Affairs want to achieve? What do we want to achieve? And how do we actually achieve the benefits as a country so that we can implement this digital identity? The progress that has been made to date, there's been some factors that have stifled it, but it is because that collaboration hasn't reached its full potential. So that's my appeal again on a call like this today, is to say, let's join forces, let's work together, and let's identify what we need to do so to practically get this going. I think that's if you remember anything, remember that, please.
So thank you, Chantal. So the motion has started. It's been several years in the making. We've got a report out and we're into phase 2 already. And so South Africa is very serious about getting going on a digital identity. And so if we swing to Simon, who's now on the other side, or slightly more north of us than I think Pretoria, then I suppose the question for you, Simon, is are we behind? I mean, what's happening in the big bad world out there?
So I think the short answer is that South Africa is at a similar part in the journey to the majority of countries in the world, but you are behind the pioneering countries. So there are a number of markets that have moved faster and further in their digital identity journey than you have, and there's plenty that you can learn from them. I guess a couple of comments. One is that we see two archetypes of digital identity schemes. Those that are effectively mandated, run by the government. So the government is the driver of the digital identity scheme. They typically are building it and building the infrastructure and providing that to their citizens. And then we see a set of countries that are driving digital identity through private sector schemes, typically consortiums, typically involving banks, sometimes involving sort of telecoms companies and others as well, but where the private sector provides the digital identity infrastructure supported by government and obviously involving government because of the golden source points that we were just talking about, but provided through the private sector. And so when we look at those countries, so for example, in the first group would be places like China and Singapore. In the second group, countries such as Canada, Norway, Sweden, Denmark. When we look at them, we see that they're further along on what we would call a spectrum of digital identity, which is actually very similar to what Darlene and Sean have described. So moving from physical IDs to just an electronic version of a physical ID to a digital ID that actually is stored and verified digitally, to the digital wallet, what we would refer to as a rich digital ID that has lots of credentials, that provides a lot more detail around the individual and actually allows a much broader set of use cases. And even the most developed markets haven't got to that last stage and have basically have the end point in terms of all of the solutions that they could offer. But we do see some particularly valuable lessons from places like Sweden and their bank ID system that we can learn from.
So Simon, you used the word bank. I mean, is that something that is leading the debate, or is it predominantly government? What is the balance there?
Yeah, so if you think about banks, they have had to verify the identity of their customers, maintain information and data security at very high standards, keep to very high standards of effectively customer identification for things like anti-money laundering and know your customer regulations. And that's actually all of the same capabilities that are required for having a very strong digital identity. And so we quite often see that banks are trusted to provide these services, have a lot of the capabilities to provide these services and capabilities to support digital identity, and so are quite often involved in the development of digital identity schemes. But the government does need to be involved in some way, because as we talked about, the underlying golden sources are often, effectively government sources. And therefore it involves a collaboration. Even where the banks are leading, there is a collaboration required.
Yeah, so I think we're going to get that thematic coming out. And of course, when it comes to banks, I mean, one of the things that I think about in banking is that we don't sell data. So that's possibly one of the reasons why trust is a little bit higher. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick with you, Simon, to do the second round and say, the concept of digital identity in my mind has shifted from these technologists sitting in front of computers to the national agendas of governments. And one thing we often read about is the notion that there is a link between digital identity and financial inclusion. Are you seeing that and the type of use cases that might be coming out?
Definitely, and particularly in the more developing countries. So if you look at somewhere like India, where effectively a digital identity scheme has been provided more broadly, that has allowed greater access to actually not just financial inclusion, but broader society inclusion in terms of the services and that citizens can access in terms of both government services and financial services. So it provides a more secure route for access to the economy, particularly for those that are currently marginalized. So it is definitely an accelerant of financial inclusion, but requires a lot of work in terms of providing all of those people with digital identities. So it's not easy, but it definitely helps to improve inclusion.
So to the panel, I mean, financial inclusion for South Africa, I mean, where do you see this emerging? I don't know who wants to start. Do you want to throw it, Darlene? Do you want to open up?
Yeah, so Mark and I absolutely concur with what Simon's saying. We've, as you know, we've partnered with Southern African Fraud Prevention Services, SAFPS, who also work very closely with the Department of Home Affairs. And we did this on the basis that we know that it needs to be a trusted brand, and in our view, we're doing it from the aspect of digital inclusion, which does lead to financial inclusion. And you've got to understand that there has been a growth in the digital era, where even companies that were not considering of going digital and individuals that were not considering going digital out of fear of fraud have been forced to, on the back of what's happened with COVID. Now, what a digital identity does is it creates that element of trust that, okay, you're going to go the extra mile if you're a service provider in making sure that you are dealing with me. And what that means is that it recreates trust between businesses and citizens or consumers in the country. And what that does is it opens up new opportunities. It opens up new growth opportunities for the country. And that ultimately stimulates financial growth and financial inclusivity. So for me, the two are not, that you can't separate them. Digital inclusivity feeds financial inclusivity as well. And it means that people that have previously not been able to access services, like you said in your opening statement, now has the capability of actually participating in services that they previously might not have.
And that goes right the way through to voting, it goes right the way through to opening bank accounts, depositing your money, etc. Chantal, your thoughts?
So I think completely, obviously, in agreement with my fellow panelists. But I think if you look at the global examples, hindsight is fantastic because you can say, oh, the benefits in India, also there was tax leakage. You look at countries like Estonia and you think people can't even imagine using paper or, you know, having manual processes. But I think that the point is, if you scratch a little bit deeper and you look at it, you think about financial inclusion as not only having a bank account. Look at South Africa. Lots of people have accounts, but it's the usage. So financial inclusion isn't, I've ticked the box, you have a bank account. Because ultimately what happens is people cash out. There's a huge portion of our economy that we're not catering for, that we're not giving loans to, that we're not giving products and services that they need as citizens of the country. So it's about creating this new universe, this digital economy where people can interact. Yes, there's lots of things to think about. And Delene, you mentioned it, the fraudsters. And as the systems get smarter, guess what? So do the fraudsters get smarter. So it's about looking at this holistically and saying, how do we address the fundamental issues around trust? Whether we like it or not, the banking system has trust. People feel I'm safe, you know, I've got a bank account, but it's about deepening that. What about the portions of our country that don't have access to that, that it's just, there's no signal, there's nothing that you can actually reach those consumers. It's about understanding literacy. It's about understanding all these components. So digital identity is not the silver bullet to financial inclusion, but it's one of the fundamental things, building blocks to take it forward.
So Chantal, thank you. Sean, do you want to add to that? I mean, you know, we've got major problems in South Africa. SASSA grant payments, for example, we've got lots of fraud that takes place there, and getting access to government to person, a lot of work on there. Your thoughts around inclusion?
The inclusion, from my perspective, would kind of become automatically if people have trust in what you're actually delivering. And because of moving into this digitized age, whether we like it or not, it's here to stay. It's to make sure that the information within this digitized domain is trusted. So getting data from a golden source, making sure the data is not manipulated. So if you are doing loans, as an example, am I collecting from the right account? Do I have proof of bank account? In today's domain, it's kind of, if I need to get proof of bank account, it's a piece of paper. As soon as it's on paper, the ability to cause fraud is rife. So to me, it's also building that trust to get the economy going again, so that when I am dealing with a person, I know, for, as Delian said, I'm dealing with the right person. The person is sharing the correct data with me. In other words, I do not need to now have another list of people within the organization to make sure the document is not fraudulent, that there's no manipulation, and. So to me, it's the building that trust from a digital identity perspective. As soon as I know who I'm dealing with, there afterwards the data can be trusted, because within the ecosystem, it should not be manipulated.
So trust is the baseline for digital identity, and it lends itself to eliminating something which we're very familiar with in South Africa, which is fraud. And we have all sorts of elements of fraud. And I'm going to go to Deline, because I know with South African Fraud Prevention Services, that's a logical segue. So what we're going to do now is let's have a look at some use cases. And there will be some obvious ones, but I'd be interested to see how far we can go in finding ways that digital identity could improve the quality of life of individuals, just because we have this network that then replaces a whole range of individuals who are responsible for making sure that you, the person, are the person that you are, and that what you commit to doing, you can execute on. So Deline, ideas around how you would actually use a digital identity.
Well, Mark, I can tell you that we've only been at it since August with our solution, and some of the use cases that we've come across, we couldn't have dreamed up of. So where we did a conference, I think it was in July somewhere, and I cannot tell you how overwhelming it was that companies came to us and said, you know, okay, so we think it could be used like this. I'll give you an example.
Give me some examples. I want to hear.
So Skynet, okay, is one of our customers, and they do a lot of different deliveries, and one of them, for instance, is medical deliveries, and when you do Schedule 6 drugs deliveries, you've got to prove that you're giving it to the right person. Now, I wouldn't have thought about that in the sense of a digital identity, but what they then did is they said to us, okay, we also need to cater for touchless, contactless deliveries, because in a COVID era, I don't want to touch your pen, I don't want to touch your clipboard, and I don't necessarily want to spend an extended period of time in front of you. So we created a capability where when they have a parcel to deliver to you, they enroll you, and when the driver gets to your gate, you don't touch anything of theirs. You use your own mobile phone to verify that you are who you claim to be, and the driver drops off your parcel and he drives off. And you have comfort that that person is who they claim to be. And we're actually able to attach a proxy person too, because you can imagine if I've got Schedule 6 drugs, I might be bedridden, but I trust somebody else to collect on my behalf. In our world, we're always busy. It might be the receptionist that then enrolls and says, okay, I trust this person to be responsible to bring it to me.
So that's one case. And you mentioned the words like a quick enrollment. I mean, we're seeing across the board, everyone can nod in agreement that it's not a difficult process. This is takes you a minute or so, and we're up.
Less than a minute.
So this is quite a quick process. Maybe we need to explore that a little bit further. But let me ask you another example, Deline. Do you have anything else to add very quickly? Yeah. And we'll go around the room.
I can tell you that one of the other use cases is think of marketplaces and the sheer amount of fraud that happens there, right? So I've got something I want to sell, you want to buy it, but we don't know each other from a bar of soap. We met in an online world, and I mean, you can apply this to everything. The dating fraud that happened recently. I want to trust the person that I'm interacting with, and with digital identity, we make that trust possible. So we could identify against a golden source. Think of, there's an example that I love using. If smaller businesses have historically accepted a paper-based copy that you are who you claim to be, and you drive off with my trailer, if you don't bring it back, I'm going to hunt that person, but that person might not have been the person that took my trailer. Now we're enabling smaller businesses, and we're making it cost-effective and quick. And that's the thing, right? So we are not just it's not just about creating digital capabilities, but we're making it possible for smaller businesses to afford the ability to trust the person that I'm engaging with, the customer that I'm selling to. So it has multiple use cases.
So there we go. So we've already seen delivering of drugs, which is very important. I would imagine that's the same as a cell phone. You get to somebody's house and you want to be able to take a high value or high risk article and identify the person there. So there you got it. I heard a little bit about gates and stuff like that. So before you go through the gate, you can identify who you are before you get into your townhouse complex. I'm hearing you talk about trailer hire as an example of handing over a high value good to some arbitrary lurker who's paid you a fraction of the price of that good. I mean, motor cars, etc. Who then that there's the right person, and you've actually got an identity of who they are. Chantal, should we move on to you and say, what other use cases can you see coming out of this?
I think it's endless. I just sit and think, if you have to fill in that form, think of every time you have to fill in a form and say who I am and where I stay. So whether it's at a new doctor's room, whether you're renewing your license, whether you are doing something for the school with your children, signing a document, education, there are so many examples. So practically, it's about putting the control in your hands. It's making my life easier as an end user, as a consumer, but it's also building that trust. So that theme you were talking about earlier on, trust, 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 it's about that. And the bigger benefits is about the cost efficiency and the process efficiency. We can't even get started there, but those are some examples.
So thank you. Sean, let me jump across to you quickly, and I'll come back to you now, Simon. Sean, in your world, where do you see digital identity making the biggest impact?
In the digital world. So, I mean, in today's world, I mean, the number of use cases discussed was in that face-to-face domain. But we also do a lot of online applications, apply for loans, apply for a house, apply. And sharing that sense of data today is, I need a scan, I need to take a photo of something, I need to. Whereas if I could share everything from my digital wallet, first instance, there's trust in the data that's been shared, not manipulated. It comes from a trusted source. So those applications and the way they flow could be totally streamlined.
So do you see, Sean, sorry, I'm cutting you off there, I apologize, there's a bit of a delay, but do you see that being something like when you log onto your computer? I mean, is that your digital footprint?
That's the start. So within the digital identity app, you could share credentials to actually log on to a website. The concept of user ID and password goes away. There's a share, I am dealing with that set of individuals. It's not somebody that has now stolen or hacked and got a hold of my user ID and password. So to me, it starts at that point and takes you through. When I'm on a website applying for a mobile device in a contract, I share banking details, my ID. It's another form I need to fill in, proof of residence. I mean, the list goes on depending on where. Hospital administrations, proof of medical aid, back to work, proof of vaccination. So, I mean, that list at the end of the day, as we normally talk about, it becomes my digital persona of the actual individual. And we as individuals have different personas depending on who we are and where we come from. And this starts creating that persona. The bigger it gets, the more trust there is in it, because the large number of trusted sources you've actually interacted with.
So in actual fact, what you're doing is on your digital identity, you're starting off, as I understand it now, is that you get the government to give you a proof of life almost, that's where you existed, birth certificate, etc., etc. Then through your lifespan, you're attaching more and more proof of your existence, from medical records to educational records, etc., etc. And so you come through life becoming a stronger and stronger, unavoidable, trusted element in society because it's multi-purpose. So it's even stronger than a government identity document. Simon, would you agree with that? And where do you see use cases taking place in the other part of the world?
Yeah, so I would agree with that. We sort of tend to split this into sort of two categories. A set of use cases that are really allowing you to do something that you already do today in a much more streamlined, much more efficient, much more effective way. And there was a great set of things mentioned, when we look at that from the simplest, just age verification, all the way through to access to, for example, medical services and bank accounts and these sort of things. And then the second category is services that, and these are typically digital services that don't exist today, but are enabled by digital identity. And particularly in the area of open data, open banking, open finance, we see quite a lot of new services, for example, looking to optimize the customer's finances, access, work out which loans, not just which loans are being offered, but which loans would be approved for a particular customer, because you have that data and you have that information within the digital identity, because the customer, if the customer gives that permission, you could imagine services that sort of go out on behalf of that customer using the digital identity and effectively bring back a set of offers, and those sort of services that build on digital identity become available in future, and we see versions of these things, but that's where we see it heading.
So that's good news. And I suppose when we talk about this, I mean, there's a question in the chat, and maybe now's the time. I don't see anyone else asking any questions, so everyone must understand what we're saying. So thank you for the dinner conversation. And it says in the Shani now, so your digital certificate becomes your authentication? I'm not sure about that. We've been talking about digital as if it is a thing, right? But in actual fact, what you're doing is you're saying that my face, I am my digital identity, and this proves that I am who I say I am. Sean, do you want to jump onto that and say your digital certificate becomes your authentication? How do you see that? How do you answer that?
So it's not actually a certificate. It's a digitized set of attributes that belong to your face, and that you don't. So you use your face as an authentication method, but your data in itself has been verified, and you actually share that data in a digitized world as your face being the authentication thereof. The data has been verified with the Department of Home Affairs as an example, or the data has been verified through your bank because of a bank account. But your face is utilized as the authentication. That it is who I am dealing with, and that data belongs to that individual, because you don't send your face along. You actually just use your face to authenticate, and then you send the actual data across.
So when you're verifying with the golden source, Department of Home Affairs, what you're actually doing is saying, this is my face, this is my identity number, you tell me that I've got it right. And they come back and say, well, based on that face and based on the record of the face that we've got using facial recognition, and based on the identity number to that face that we've got, we agree that that person is who you say you are. Now, the next question in the chat talks about trusted platforms. And I don't know who wants to take this question, but basically, Chantal, we're moving forward. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a digital ecosystem of trusted people that we can rely on to support digital identity. Do you want to answer that question?
Yes, I think that's a very important question, because trust, as we've all heard, it's built on trust. So the key thing is there needs to be a process of bringing these parts together. As you mentioned, Banks of Africa has actually sponsored the next phase of this digital identity narrative across the country, because there are solutions that operate within the environment, and like Deline, they're providing services, ABSA providing different services. But the important part now is bringing these parts together. So Banks of Africa, just a quick thing, they're the utility. That their business is about joining the best of the best. But in order to do that, there needs to be a trusted way of working and governance around it. So there's a project ongoing at the moment about building the case for South Africa and how these parts can work together. I'm not going to go into the detail of the program itself, but please reach out to us. Delene's part of it, Sean's part of it, Mark's part of it. It's about cross-industry. It's the story for South Africa and solving digital identity piece by piece, starting with use cases. So please, we're part of this phase at the moment. We're in execution. I hope you all are feeling, I want to be part of it and I want to contribute. So join forces and let's make this real for the country.
So we've got 6 minutes left, probably only. I see Shani's hands up and I'm going to ask to come in. I'd like to conclude with a quick futuristic, let's have a look at the future. What do you think is the future for digital identity? But we'll go around the room. Shani, do you want to ask us a quick question?
No, sorry, I was just thinking, I understand how the authentication work and that you're building the trust identities. I'll reach out to Chantal to find out how do you build those in a cloud environment where data is stored and so easily accessed and breached. If there's information available on that, I'd love to get in touch. If you can just put me in touch with whoever I can reach out to.
That's perfect. And the way you say it, it's like, oh, you can just breach cloud. I don't see it as, oh, you can just breach cloud. I think it's more difficult than what trying to get into my computer. But nevertheless, we'll have that conversation with you with pleasure. So we'll go around the room and let's have a question in the final couple of minutes. In the future, not tomorrow, not the horizon, the future. How do you see digital identity changing your life? Who wants to go first? Shall I pick somebody? Simon, how do you see, I mean, when you look to the future, what do you think, what is the big thing?
So I think the big thing is that digital identity will just become an integrated and, you know, every day and multiple times a day part of your life and how you do things. So, you know, so almost everything that you do, whether that's, you know, paying for something or accessing a service or opening accounts, will all have digital identity involved in it, and it will just, you know, it will become part of how you do things. And I think also that the other big transformation that we'll see, I think we'll see a lot less identity related fraud. So that will become less of a part of people's life if we get this right.
Simon, thank you, and really great having you all the way from the UK. Delene, your thought process?
Yeah, so Mark, I think that what digital identity does, and I concur with what Simon says, you know, it's going to become part of our everyday life, just how we currently do payments. We already have a client that does pay with face instead of putting in a PIN code. But I think that what it also does is we know that we're now living in a world where people become more aware of their rights to their data, that their data needs to be centered around them, not necessarily around the companies using the data. And that's why we focus on the individual being in control of their data. And what it also does is that it starts to help manage consent. So did I give you consent to work with my digital identity? It ticks the POPI and the GDPR elements from a needs perspective as well. But ultimately, I honestly believe that people need to be in control of their identity. It's not like you can go to the Department of Home Affairs and ask for a new ID number when you've been breached. It's not like replacing a card. Having your digital identity belong to you and being able to use your biometrics, your unique attributes that gives access to that digital identity, gives us a greater sense of protection. So my utopia is that I know who I am dealing with every time I deal with somebody. And I can trust that when my service providers engage with my account or open an account for me, they can be 100% sure that it's me.
Perfect. So Delene, thank you very much for that. Sean, your closing comments?
So to me, digital identity is going to be the same way smartphones came into our life. It's going to be slow in the beginning, and within 5 years, I can't do without it.
And that's on just about everything that we do. Chantal, your thoughts?
So I think we're going to use a lot less pens, and we're also going to save trees because we're not going to be using all the paper. But I think on a practical level, there's a huge education element because we're talking about behavioral change at country level. So we must keep that in the back of our minds. As much as this is going to change, we need to educate. People need to be informed on the how and the benefit behind it. But it's going to change our lives. It's going to be fantastic.
So in concluding, there's so much more to learn about digital identity, its use cases, and that's the reason we put the email address in the chat. We want to hear from you. In the concluding remarks, as we hand back to you, Mike, I think the one thing to take away from here is I am who I say I am, and I can prove it. And that's digital identity. Thank you.
Mark, thank you so much for moderating that panel discussion with these esteemed panelists so efficiently. I think I certainly took away a lot of things that are new to me, and I guess I have a little sense of comfort in terms of negotiating and transacting digitally, because some of us come from an era where this wasn't necessarily the way we do things. So I'm sure there are many on the discussion this morning that feel a little bit more comfortable thanks to our esteemed panelists. So thank you. Before I hand over to Mr. Craig Sumption, the CFO of Hatch Africa, for some concluding remarks and a vote of thanks, I would just like to remind all the participants that we plan to have a follow-up. Yes, I've cleared this with Mark. I don't know if he's spoken to the panelists yet, but in 2022, we are looking at having a follow-up webinar on the subject of perhaps competition in banking or another digital thematic. So please watch this space. Please visit our website at info@secondcham.com. Craig, at this point, I'd like to hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Mike, and thank you to you and Second Cham for arranging these sessions. And to Siggy, thank you for Eduvos. I read an article this morning that people living in extreme poverty reduced from nearly 80% in 1820 to around 10 to 15% in 2018. And a big factor in that is education, and education is vital. And you know, the conversation this morning, I think Deline mentioned it, that digital inclusivity leads to the financial inclusivity, or as Chantal said, at least a key building block in that mix. And then Sean raised in the issue of trust, and I think everyone spoke about trust. There's no doubt that trust is a critical factor. I definitely am no major tech savvy individual, but already I barely carry a wallet around with me, and I use my phone to make payments nearly all the time these days. So Deline, Chantal, Sean, Simon, thank you very much for sharing your insights, really valuable information, and Mark moderating, really great session. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for all those attending.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Craig. And just from my side, a final thank you to Siggy and Team Eduvos. I'm looking forward to many more opportunities to collaborate on these platforms going forward. I know, Elna, you and Siggy want to have another chat with me about events into 2022. So once again, we're proud at the opportunity of being able to collaborate with Eduvos. Thank you. Wishing you all a wonderful day. And if I don't see you again, have a safe and happy festive season going into 2022. So bye from my side.